Very good. Wonderful. Well, we are going to be continuing with Narada Bhakti Sutras. So remember where we left off last time. In the last section, Narada was talking about the importance of Sangha, of Satsangha, the importance of good association, the dangers of bad association, etc. And we ended with verse 46, Kastarati mayam. Very interesting verse that I won't go into again, but that's where we ended last time. And you're going to see a similar pattern repeated with the very last verse, verse 50. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Just wanted to tell you ahead of time. So let's begin with verse 47. And again, these next 4 verses are a theme. They're a thought. Okay, and especially 47 and 48 go together. They're meant to. So when I read 47 in isolation, it's going to sound incomplete. Don't worry about that. All right. So verse 47 of Narada Bhakti Sutras. He who serves in a place that is secluded, who severs at the very root his attachment to the material world, who becomes free of the 3 gunas, and who relinquishes the desire for wealth and ease. And then we stop there. That's just where the verse naturally stops. But again, the thought continues with the next verse. But let's deal with this verse first. And let's start first with the very first clause of the first sentence. That is, he who serves in a place that is secluded. Now, what is the significance of this verse? Several things. First of all, he who serves. He who serves. We have to remember always that our greatest aspiration in life, interestingly, as Vaishnavas, as devotees of Narayana, of Vishnu, Vaishnava means devotee of Vishnu, a partisan of Vishnu could be the exact translation. Our goal, interestingly, in fact, let me ask this. What is our goal? To become masters or to become servants? Oh, and let me warn you, it's a trick question. There you go. Very good. It's actually both. It depends on the context. We are meant to master ourselves such that we can become absolute servants at the feet of Bhagavan Sri Krishna, such that then we can become spiritual masters and teach the world. You see, it's actually both. Now, in this context, of course, Narada is talking about service, about doing service, seva. And this is an aspect of Vedic culture that is simply not stressed enough. The idea that indeed we are meant to be servants. In fact, not just servants, but in our tradition, we refer to ourselves sometimes as dasanudasana, dasunudasa. In other words, we see ourselves not merely as servants of God, but actually our humility should be such that we even think to ourselves, what audacity to think that I am a servant of God, that I have the right, that I have the ability to stand right next to God and simply serve Him. In actuality, our humility is such that we say, no, I'm not even worthy of such a thing. I am the servant of the servant of the servant of God. And how does this play out in a realistic sort of way? Parampara. The way that we see ourselves, I can tell you, the way I see myself is that I am the servant of my guru, who is the servant of his guru, and going on until finally reaching Adi Guru, the first guru, who is Bhagavan. And in this way, this shows us humility. It shows us the meaning of humility, but more. Let's talk a little bit deeper about this. What does it mean to serve? What does it mean to actually serve? What it means to be a servant of God, to be a servant of Guru, to be a servant in general, is that with humility, with devotion, we do everything in our power to devote our energy and who we are toward the center of all things. This is what it means to be a servant. So it's significant that he uses this term here. He who serves. Now, what? He who serves in a place that is secluded. Now let's talk about the second part of this first clause a little bit. He who serves in a place that is secluded. Now, of course, this is the difficulty with all Vedic literature, but we see this especially with the sutras that are very terse, really short. Why do we need a guru in order to understand sutra literature? Because it's guaranteed we'll misunderstand. Guaranteed. We may be smart, and we may read one sutra, half a sutra. If we're very smart, we may get through 2 or 3 sutras and kind of understand what it's saying. Even then, I can guarantee your understanding will be very partial. But you'll read something like this, and half the people, most people who read this will misunderstand. Okay? So, he who serves in a place that is secluded. What does that mean? The typical person would understand this to mean, all right, I must be a hermit now. I have to be a hermit. What does this mean, to be secluded? Well, it means I have to denounce everything. I can't have a family. I can't be in the world. I have to live in a hut high in the Himalayas, not see another human being. If a bird even flies by, look away from it. I have to be in absolute seclusion in order to have success in spiritual life. That is what the typical person would interpret this as saying. Now, does that sound right? No. We've seen so many sages who were sages. They were in fact enlightened beings, and they didn't, quote unquote, seclude themselves, and this is the term, physically. What does it mean to seclude yourself? You know, the last time we got together, I told the story of how when I was very young, sometimes I would wake up 2 o'clock in the morning, after sleeping, and I would just wake up, and I would go to a park, McCarran Park, in Brooklyn, in Greenpoint, and I would sometimes just sing bhajans loudly with no one else there. Sometimes a stray cat would go by or something, or some pigeons would be there. Now, it's interesting. Was I in seclusion? At that point, yes and no. There was no one else around me, but I was in the middle of New York City with 9 million people. And yet, that fit this understanding perfectly. All around me, I could see buildings outside the park. It wasn't a very big park. It was big enough that I could sing and no one would hear me. But I could see buildings. I could see cars going by outside the park. I could see a plane go by once in a while. I understood that I was in the midst of this massive city with all of this chaotic energy, even at night, even at 2 o'clock in the morning. You could feel it coming from Manhattan. At least I could. All this crazy, chaotic energy. And yet, at that moment, I was in Vaikuntha. I was thoroughly secluded, even in the midst of a city. And more, there have been times when I was younger when I would find myself in Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan, downtown Manhattan, Greenwich Village, various places, at noon, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, with thousands of people walking by. And I would be there with maybe a few other people, and we would do bhajan. Because I was with ISKCON at the time, that's what we did. We would sit in the middle of, let's say, Fifth Avenue in Greenwich Village, in a park, maybe Union Square Park or someplace like that. And with all the craziness going on, one person would be playing harmonium. I would always be playing the karatalas. Another person would be playing mridangam, and we would be singing to Krishna. And we were in seclusion, with 1 million people walking around us, with cars going by, honking their horns every half second. We were in absolute seclusion. Why? Because with all the chaotic material activity going on around us, we were centered. We had upasana. We had that proximity toward the divine within. That's what's meant by seclusion. Thus, we can find ourselves anywhere. We can find ourselves living in the world with a family, all of our responsibilities, and who here doesn't have responsibilities? Everyone does, job and so many things. And yet, internally, be in kaivalya, be in that seclusion, in such a way that while everything is going on around us, we ourselves are at peace. Thus, I pointed this out to many people. That's why we have Nataraja. That's why we have this image of Shiva dancing. And all around him are this circle of flames. And he is dancing wildly. And his hair is, just going wild. And yet you look at his face and there's absolute tranquility. Absolute tranquility. So we can be within the world and, interestingly, be in seclusion. And believe me, I've lived in ashrams on 3 continents. I've known people who lived in ashrams. They were not in seclusion because their mind was elsewhere. So it's not physical, geographic location that's of importance. That's not what this is talking about. What it's saying is seclude yourself internally more than anything, to the point where, yes, I can take you to Manhattan and we'll sit on Fifth Avenue and we'll meditate there and you'll feel as if there's not another human being in the world. That's seclusion. So, he who serves in a place that is secluded, who severs at the very root his attachment to the material world. This is stated very, very nicely. Not just, who is not attached to the material world, who severs at the very root his attachment to the material world. This is stated very emphatically. It's nice how Narada states this. What is the very root of our attachment to the material world? What is that?
Desire.
There you go. Yeah, it's desire. Desire. Not desire in the general sense. Material desire, of course. False desire. Desiring after things which, rather than being real and things that are of value, true value, ultimate value, having desire for those things, those states, those objects, those behaviors, having desire for literally anything that we can think of that in actuality is illusory and will ultimately harm us. Yeah, that is what is at the root of our attachment. Because why are we attached to the material world? Why are we attached to material things? We desire things. At every moment we're desiring things. And again, there's nothing wrong with desire in and of itself. See, this is where we differ with Buddhists a little bit. Buddhists feel that desire itself is evil. And then, of course, you ask them, well, what about the desire for nirvana? And they don't have an answer for that. No, desire itself is not bad. It's material desire. Desire for things that ultimately will give us no benefit whatsoever. That is what lies at the root of attachment to the material world. All right. Who becomes free of the 3 gunas? The 3 gunas. What are the 3 gunas? Anyone?
Tamas, rajas, and sattvas.
Yeah, sattva. Very good. Yes. And the 3 gunas themselves are simply 3 frequencies of Prakriti itself, of material energy, material nature itself. These are the 3 things that cause differentiation and variegatedness within material energy itself. So we're very attached to these 3 gunas because why? They make our illusion interesting, which is actually bad. You see, if you're in illusion and it's at least not an interesting illusion, you can get out of it pretty easily. But if the illusion is very elaborate, it's kind of like, all right, if you find yourself in prison and the prison is a horrible, horrible dungeon and it's obvious it's a prison, when you get out, you're going to really make sure you don't commit a crime again. But if you go to prison and it's kind of an interesting place, but so much so that you lose sight of the fact that you're in prison, you won't want to leave. Not understanding that, yeah, it looks nice, but try to leave. You're in prison. It's the gunas that make illusion seem interesting when in actuality it's not. It's what makes illusion seem appealing when in actuality it's not. Imagine you have an addiction to cheesecake. I always use cheesecake as an example. I don't know why. I see it as decadent dessert. Imagine if you have this addiction to cheesecake. You love cheesecake, but cheesecake, by its very nature, imagine if it always tasted like sour sawdust. It would be easy to get over that addiction. But it doesn't, does it? It tastes like cheesecake. So that's what makes it especially difficult to get over a habit like that. So gunas. So one who becomes free from the gunas. And who relinquishes the desire, there's that word, desire, for wealth and ease. Wealth and ease. Let me say that last part again and tell me what nation that we're currently living in this reminds you of. And the desire for wealth and ease. What nation does that remind you of?
Poland.
Yes, Poland, that's right. That's right, Botswana. No, this is the hallmark of America. Wealth and ease, wealth and ease. You know, so this is something also that we are to relinquish, is this desire for wealth and ease. And again, what does this mean? You see, he says this very, very distinctively, the desire for wealth and ease. Now, is wealth evil? Of course not. You can have all the wealth in the world, and it's good if you use it for good. How about ease? Yes, it's nice to have ease. In other words, it's nice to have leisure sometime. It's nice to be in an environment where you're not constantly in stress, constantly worrying about, oh, is some person going to come and kill me? Is there some wild tiger behind that bush? It's nice to live in ease. But again, if you can live in ease in a way that is spiritual or in a way that's self-indulgent, see the difference? So when we have the desire for wealth and ease for their own sake, as opposed to seeing these as tools that we can use for something greater. See, if you have ease, what do you do with that ease? You can use it for its own sake, or if you have ease, wouldn't it be nice to then read wonderful things about philosophy, about the world, to learn, to acquire wisdom? Wouldn't it be nice to use that ease in order to do yoga, in order to meditate, in order to do good? You see? All right, let's go on now to the next verse, which I said is linked. Really, these two verses go together. And this is verse 48. He who renounces material activities and the fruit of such activities becomes unaffected by the dualities of this world. And that last part, that's the point of this whole list of things that we are to avoid. So let's look at this a little bit deeper. He who renounces material activities. So that's easy for us to understand. Maybe not for the typical person, but for my students, I know for all of you, this is easy to understand. So material activities, what's meant by that? You know, he who renounces material activities, that is material activities that are performed only for their own sake. Only for their own sake. So you can eat just for its own sake, or you can eat in a way that it becomes a meditation. It becomes something that elevates you. Or you can just eat simply to enjoy. You know, and then a million other examples that can be given. All right, but let's go a little deeper. He who renounces material activities and the fruit of such activity. Now here we go to the root issue of action. And this, of course, is very simply one of the main themes and messages of Bhagavad Gita, that we are meant to engage in action. Action itself is neither good nor bad. However, if we engage in action merely with the idea that all I care about is the result of that action, and I only care about the result of that action because I want to simply enjoy the immediate fruits, benefits of that action, and I have no thought beyond that, well, that's action that's binding. That is action that's binding. However, if we can perform even the exact same action, but we have a greater scope of vision, we understand that, I use this example again because it's very easy. If our action is, all right, I want to, let's say I'm a farmer, or let's say, who are farmers these days? Nobody. Let's say I have a garden in my backyard, and I want to grow these wonderful organic vegetables. And why do I want to grow them? Because I want to enjoy the fruits, in this case the vegetables, of my action. I want to, when they're ready, pick them and just eat them. But I don't think beyond that. It's just a matter of, oh, I just want to please my belly. Well, that is fruitive activity. That is activity that produces really nothing of value. Yeah, my belly will be full, but that's it. That's it. However, this is the spiritual person. Same scenario. I have a home, I have a yard. In the backyard, I have a nice garden. I'm growing wonderful organic vegetables back there. And yes, I'm eager to see them ripen. And then when they're ready, I'm going to pick them. And then what? Ultimately, will I eat them? Well, of course. I'm not going to let them rot after I pick them. Of course, I'm going to eat them. That's understood. However, I'm going to eat them in a spirit of devotion. First, I'm going to offer them to God. Then, as I'm eating them, I'm going to be thankful to God. I'll say a prayer of grace before I eat. As I'm eating them, I'm aware of this miracle of these fresh vegetables and this food that's in front of me. And when I eat it, I'll be happy to gain that nutrition from this wonderful organic food that I grew myself. And why? So that I'll have energy to do what? Like the materialistic person, so I'll have energy to just repeat the pattern, keep gardening, keep eating, think of nothing else, keep gardening, keep eating, think of nothing else? Or with that energy, will I now do things to elevate myself spiritually, to grow spiritually? You see that divergence that's there? Same activity, but different. And I'm using an immediately understandable example of just growing food and eating. This is true for every activity. We can do material activity in such a way where we're not thinking about anything beyond just my needs, that's it. Or we can use that very activity in order to bring ourselves to an awareness of the greater cosmos, our place within it, and how the entire cosmos itself is ultimately here to serve Bhagavan, to serve God. What a difference, yet the same activity. So, he who renounces material activities and the fruit of such activity, now we understand what that means, becomes unaffected by the dualities of this world. Now let's talk about that last part. So again, keep in mind these two verses are really, they go together. So one who does all these things that we spoke about in verse 47 and 48, what will be the result? The result will be that they will become unaffected by the dualities of this world. Number one, let's talk about the dualities of this world. Yes, within this realm, we find that this is a world in which there are opposites. And we choose very often which member of those two opposites is good, which one is bad, which one we want, which one we don't want, which one we want to attract, which one we want to avoid, etc. That's the nature of this world. But also, it's the nature of duality that it's not just choice, but often things come to us in opposite pairs that we cannot avoid. One day, we're happy, joyous, everything seems wonderful, and we're on top of the world. The next day, we feel, and it may not even be true, but we feel as if our world has collapsed. And it seems like we have no power over this duality. Here's the secret. There's a reason why we feel that we don't have power over the duality. We don't. That's the secret. That's the secret. That's why Krishna says that happiness and distress come of their own accord, like the winter and summer seasons. He says this in Bhagavad Gita. That in the same way that if you live in the north, this is not so much the case, let's say if you live in San Diego, but if you live in the north, right now you go outside and what is it like? For the most part, very pleasant. But guess what? Winter's coming. And then it's not so pleasant. But guess what? Summer's coming. It will be pleasant again. But then guess what? And that's the pattern. Now, if you're living in Omaha, let's say, or what to speak of Canada or someplace like that, and it's summertime, but it gets to be late August, it gets to be September, can you say, all right, I'm going to really, really concentrate hard and winter won't come? No, of course winter's going to come. And then summer's going to come. We have no control over this. In the same way, one day will be wonderful, and one day it's guaranteed is not going to be. One day we're just going to have a lousy day, terrible day, nothing goes our way. And this is what's of importance, of course. What do we do? Well, What does Narada say? He actually gives the answer here. Becoming unaffected by the dualities of this world. When we become a spiritual person, that is, do all these things that he has been speaking about, and of course not just this, all the previous verses as well that we've studied in all this time, almost 50 verses now, and all the verses that are coming. When we do all this and we become truly spiritual, it comes to the point where do the dualities stop? No. The dualities keep going on and on. Let's say you're living in Omaha and you become a liberated being. Now suddenly winter won't come? No, winter's going to come. The duality is there, but you're unaffected. That's the key. You are unaffected. And what does unaffected mean? It means you have transcended. It means that you've transcended all the dualities of this world. And what does transcended mean? It means that you understand their nature. You understand the nature of these dualities. You understand the nature of this material world. You understand that the nature of this world is one in which everything is mixed. Pleasure and pain. Pleasure and pain. That's the nature of this world. You understand it, and you transcend it. Externally, your body even can continue going through pleasures and pains. You can get ill, have things happen to you, be doing the proverbial minding your own business. I love that term. He was minding his own business, and suddenly he fell down a flight of stairs. You can be minding your own business, something will happen. But this is what's important. You understand that that's all the external. You experience it. It's not that you don't experience the pain when you fall down the stairs. No, it hurts with every step that you're hitting. You experience the pain, you're feeling it, but internally you understand, I am not the pain. I am not the body. I am in the body. The body is a vehicle. I don't want the body to be hurt. I would prefer not to experience this pain, but that's the nature of this world, and I ultimately am hurt by nothing. Nothing can affect me. So this is what it means, that such a person who advances spiritually, becomes unaffected by the dualities of this world. All right, let's go on to the next verse, which is 49. Now this verse is interesting. Again, here's another example of how you don't have someone to guide you through these sutras. You will have no idea what is being said, and in fact, you will harm yourself. You will do the very opposite of what you're meant to do. Let me read this verse to everyone, verse 49. He who even renounces the rituals of the Vedas receives unceasing attachment to God. Wow. What in the world does that mean? You see? Oh, people have read verses like this because every so often there will be something like this, a verse like this, and people will use this as an excuse, and with tremendous glee. Yeah. I'm sorry, some of you may have encountered such people. Please keep in mind, I've been on the spiritual path for a long time, and I've met all kinds of people, all kinds of gurus, all kinds of wonderful people, all kinds of the most radical fakes humanly conceivable. And I've met people like this who they'll read a verse like this, and all right, what this means then is I can do anything I want. It's one of these, relativistic sort of routes that a person will take. Oh, this is telling me I can just denounce the Vedas altogether. The Vedas don't matter. Nothing matters. A path doesn't matter. I'll just make up the rules as I go. They'll just take this to the furthest illogical extremes that they can. And why? Because they weren't sincere to begin with. They were not sincere to begin with. You see, keep in mind who is saying this. This is Narada, and he followed the Vedas. He didn't have a relativistic attitude, you see. If you want to be honest and not someone who's dishonest on the spiritual path, very simply ask yourself, okay, well, is this verse saying then that I can just throw the Vedas out, do whatever? All right, well, who said this? It's Narada. Look at Narada's life. He follows the Vedas strictly, including the rituals, and yet he's saying this. Well, there must be a deeper meaning, and there is indeed a deeper meaning. And it's very simply this. Several things, actually. Let me start with one of the more important ones. Number one, he is pointing out the extreme loftiness and exalted status of attachment to the divine, of prema, of love of God. And what he is saying is, love of God is so exalted to the point where it is above even the Vedas. Imagine that. The Vedas are everything for us. Veda, spiritual knowledge is everything for us. The scriptures are everything for us. But he is saying that attachment to God, the love of God, is so high, is so important, is so central to what it means to be a spiritual being, to the point where even the Vedas themselves simply disappear into the background compared to love of God. You see? That's the first thing that's of importance here. The other thing that's of importance is, let me first read this again just so you can hear it, and then I'll explain the other point of this. He who even renounces what? The rituals of the Vedas, receives unceasing attachment to God. In other words, what he's really talking about here are two different things. Karma kanda versus jnana kanda. That is, what he's talking about is empty ritualism. You see, there are people who follow the Vedas, but for who what they do is really empty ritualism. That is, they think that simply doing the rituals is of importance. Not even why you're doing the rituals. Simply doing the rituals is of importance. And what he's explaining is, no, this is nothing. It's attachment to God. It is love of God. That is everything. In other words, for those who know a little bit of the let's say, history of the yoga tradition and the Vedic tradition, there are two ways of doing things. There are three, but two generally. There is what's called karma kanda, and there is jnana kanda. Karma kanda means following the Vedas, but doing it actually in a somewhat materialistic way. Can a person be quote-unquote spiritual, but be spiritual in a materialistic way? Of course they can. If their ultimate goal in doing spirituality is material benefit. So there are many people who will do the rituals that are found in the Vedas, but they're not doing it to know God. They're not doing it really to benefit others. They're not doing it to have self-realization. They're doing it so that in their next life they can be born as a god. Or they can be born back on earth but wealthy. You see, spiritual materialism. This is who Narada is talking about. That's karma kanda. But then there's jnana kanda. And what is jnana kanda? Jnana kanda is following spirituality for this higher purpose. That higher purpose being, indeed, to know truth. Indeed, to know God. Indeed, to know the Absolute. So these are the two paths. So this is really what he is juxtaposing here. The rituals of the Vedas, he's talking about spiritual materialism, versus unceasing attachment to God. Here we're talking about jnana kanda. Here we're talking about true spirituality, pure spirituality. So, he who even renounces what? Karma kanda, the rituals of the Vedas, that is simply doing the rituals of the Vedas in an empty way, that person receives unceasing attachment to God. Okay? Are we understanding this now? All right. So you see, it's not a pronouncement in which the idea is, oh yes, throw out the Vedas, throw out the rules, throw out rituals, etc., and just make up your own rules as you go along. No, not at all. It's juxtaposing a tremendously high thing, but versus an infinitely high thing. There's tremendously high. Then there's infinitely high. We want infinitely high. All right. Sa tarati lokams dharayati. Verse 50. And again, you'll see how, like with verse 46, I don't know if you remember because it was a month ago, but that verse also repeats itself twice. Kastarati. That's verse 46. Now look at 50. Same pattern. Sa tarati. it repeats twice. Now, what have I said in the past of when you find a verse that repeats something? It's emphasizing something important here. So, that person, what person? That person who now has unceasing attachment to God. That person crosses beyond. That person crosses beyond illusion, and he helps the whole world to cross beyond illusion. This is an extremely powerful verse and very important verse. So let's look at this a little bit deeply. First, like the last time, I explained why specifically in verse 46, why it repeated twice, and it's the same thing here. The first is a positive, the second is a negative. The first one is implying that person who crosses beyond and goes where? You don't cross beyond unless you're going somewhere. You don't cross a river unless you desire to get to something to the other side. There is no such thing as crossing without a desire to have a destination. So, again, this is why we need Guru to understand this, because much of what is there in sutra literature is implied. But then what the implication even is, we can't even speculate. That person who crosses beyond and achieves what? The spiritual realm. That person who crosses beyond into Vaikuntha. That person, and now stating it in the negative, who crosses beyond illusion. So that person who no longer is in illusion. When you are no longer in illusion, in fact, I'll just ask this. When you are no longer in illusion, where are you? When you are no longer in illusion, all illusion, even the subtlest of illusions, even the smallest of illusions, all illusion, without any trace that illusion ever was there within you, when all illusion is gone, where are you?
You merged with the super consciousness, overall consciousness.
Yeah, you're in Vaikuntha. You're in the spiritual realm. You're in the spiritual realm. So, this is a way to understand what is meant by our ultimate destiny. Our ultimate goal is to rid ourselves of illusion such that now we are in the realm of its opposite. We are in the realm of truth. That is the realm of God. All right. So that person crosses beyond such illusion, and let's say by implication, that person is now in the divine presence, and this is very nice, this is beautiful, and he helps the whole world to cross beyond illusion. He helps the whole world to cross beyond illusion.
If they listen to him.
Yeah, if they listen to him. He helps the whole world to cross beyond illusion. See, isn't it interesting how this is Narada speaking, and again, it helps when you read a sutra literature if you know the person, and if you see the person's words in very personal terms. This is Narada speaking. Who is Narada? Narada is exactly himself what is explained in this verse. He is someone who is a purely liberated being. To say he is a rishi, see, a rishi, that's the highest of yogis. That's one of the highest attainments. A rishi reveals our scriptures. To call him a rishi is not even going far enough to explain his exalted status, Narada. He is a being who indeed has done this. He has crossed beyond. He has no illusion within him. Thus, wherever he finds himself, anywhere within this world, he himself is in Vaikuntha. He is in a purely spiritual state. Wherever he is, he can be speaking to the gods, in Svarga Loka. He can be here speaking to humans, speaking to kings, speaking to sages. He can be speaking to the lowest of humanity, which he often does. He can be speaking to some hunter, some cruel person, and trying to teach that person. He can find himself anywhere, but at all times, in his mind, within, he is in the spiritual world. That's Narada. But more, what does Narada do? Precisely this. He helps the entire world to cross beyond. Now, that's Narada. We're not Narada. So, how does this apply to us? That is this. He's trying to convey from his own experience what really is the highest thing that a person should do. And that is, well, what do people think is the highest thing? Even spiritual people, especially spiritual people. What do they think is the highest thing? To achieve liberation. For one who truly is an exalted sage, however, even that's not enough. Even to achieve liberation, what does that even mean? That you have no illusions anymore. Your suffering has come to an end. But for a truly high sage, even that's not enough. Now, what happens? You have compassion. Now you see others around you who still are in suffering. And what do you wish to do? Save them. Help them in any way that you can. So he helps the whole world to cross beyond illusion. So this is always my challenge to people, is in a way, there even can be a type of taint of spiritual selfishness if our goal is our own enlightenment alone. When we look at truly exalted sages, the highest of all sages, they are beings, of course, who have enlightenment, but more, they wish to enlighten others. They wish to enlighten others. That's why you take someone like Narada Muni, and he chooses to be within the material world. He chooses to be within the material world. Is he really? Internally, of course, no. He's not. He's in the spiritual realm. But he traverses the material world, all three planetary systems, from top to bottom. And he spends all of his time going from place to place to place, teaching people, being at the right place at the right time to shift history. If you read some of the stories about him, you read stories about him in Mahabharata, in the Puranas, in so many different places. He will suddenly appear at a time when something is about to happen. And quite literally, history is going in this direction. Here comes Narada, and he shifts it and makes it go in a different direction. Is that true? Again and again, you hear these stories that he'll appear to a king who's about to make a decision, and he warns the king, don't do this. It's kind of like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. Gandalf does the same thing. If you see the movies or read the book, he suddenly appears, and he's a mysterious figure. That's Narada. He's this mysterious person who will suddenly appear, and he'll give advice that will ultimately lead to Dharma being elevated. So that person helps the whole world to cross beyond illusion. That's what we also are meant to do. We are meant to help the whole world cross beyond illusion. And are there accidents in this world? For some people. Some people live, in fact, accidental existences, where seemingly everything in their life is an accident, and that's very sad. But for individuals who live full spiritual lives, there are very few, if any, accidents at all. And then for those who are very, very elevated, there are no accidents whatsoever. So it's no accident that we are ending today's class on the Narada Bhakti Sutras on this very important verse. He helps the whole world to cross beyond illusion. Thus we are to become leaders in every way, to become leaders. So I'll end there. Are there any questions about anything?
I was reading some essays by Swami Ram Suktas called The Discovery of Truth and Immortality. And he has an essay in there which he spells out very clearly the differences between the three basic yogas, karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. And he says that there's actually a natural progression. The lowest of them, so to speak, is karma yoga, where you serve everything you do, you dedicate it to the divine. Well, actually, everything you do it for everybody else in the world. It's all service. And then there's Jnana Yoga, where you negate the world and the body.
Let me stop you for 1 second. But please, I want you to continue with your thought, but I have to stop you right there. Otherwise, I might not remember. For the past roughly 150 years or so, even some semi-great teachers have misunderstood what is meant by karma yoga. And Krishna explains what is karma yoga in a no-nonsense sort of way. Karma yoga is not service to humanity. That's Marxism. That's not karma yoga. This is an idea that began with the neo-Hindu movement of the 19th century. The idea that what karma yoga means is that you become kind of a charitable missionary and go throughout the world and try to heal lepers and things like that. I can go into historically how that idea came about, but that would be too deep. That's not karma yoga. With karma yoga, you dedicate your activities exclusively to God. If you go to a soup kitchen and you very, very nicely volunteer to have poor people and hungry people come and you're giving them soup, you're not doing karma yoga, you're doing charity. That's dhanam. That's charity, not karma yoga. And again, as you know, if you really want to go deeply into it, I can explain historically how that got all mixed up. But technically, that is not even close to karma yoga. If God is not involved, it's not karma yoga whatsoever. It's service to humanity. It's charity, but it's not karma yoga. It's an ethical activity. It's a virtuous activity. But the idea of karma yoga is that you are transcendentalizing your activities. That is, there is no material factor involved in your activities. What it means is that physically you are doing, but in actuality, even that physical doing is purely spiritual. The only way that that's possible is if the purely spiritual is introduced. In other words, when you are rendering service to God, then you are engaging in transcendental activity. But if it's one being in illusion rendering service to another being in illusion, there's nothing transcendental in it. It's nice, it will produce good karma. Now, pause for a few moments. And let me repeat that. It will produce good karma. Is our goal to produce good karma?
No.
No.
We want to get to Vaikuntha.
We want to transcend all the karma. Now, of course, does this mean that, a soup kitchen called me up and, they desperately need one more volunteer. But that's material. I'm not going to do that. Is that what I'm saying? No, of course not. It's good to always do good. Everything, even as seemingly unimportant as, we see a person begging on the street and they truly are sincere. It's not just a scam. They really are starving and all we have is a nickel on us. Well, you give that person a nickel. That's good. From that lowest, seemingly almost meaningless little charity, all the way up to, indeed, rendering service directly to God. It is all good. Whenever we have a choice of doing good versus doing nothing, always choose to do good. However, the distinction is material good versus spiritual good, material activity versus spiritual activity. When you're doing material activity that is good, that's charity. When you're doing spiritual activity that is good, that is seva, service, and that is karma yoga. So simply saying, I'm, giving food to the world, that's my karma yoga. No, that's your charity. You're not doing yoga unless God is involved. But
leaving
please.
aside the precise definition of what karma yoga and jnana yoga and bhakti yoga are, let's assume that he was explaining it, or maybe it wasn't translated perfectly. He was explaining it at the level of most readers. Since God is a somewhat abstract concept, telling people that, just giving very, very simple, basically incorrect idea of what karma yoga is, but better than nothing. His point is that karma yoga and jnana yoga separate you from this false conception that the body and the world are yourself, your identification with the body and the world. So what you succeed with achieving with the best karma yoga and jnana yoga is realization of your soul. But you're not done. It's only bhakti yoga where you're developing a devotional relationship with the divine, that you enter into the relationship with the divine, and you have complete fulfillment. Now, it seems to me that it's very, very hard to renounce material activities and fruit of such activities. So any help you can take to do so is good. So if you can do it by karma yoga and separate yourself from the false identification with the body by doing karma yoga, that's all to the good. And that's probably the first stage for everybody. And so we can go in a stepwise fashion: karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. We can't necessarily, we're not maybe capable to jump directly into bhakti yoga because that's skipping over too many different intermediate levels. So one way that one could detach oneself from material attachments is you get disgusted with the seasonal changes you're talking about. You were saying winter follows summer, follows winter, and so on and so on. There's pleasure followed by pain, followed by pleasure, followed by pain. Couldn't a person get disgusted with the unending nature of that cycle? You know, even though there's pleasure in there, it's never permanent. Because it doesn't last, eventually he gets worn out, tired of it, and disgusted with it, and that's what drives him to a spiritual life.
Absolutely, definitely. This is one motivation for people who become spiritual, is that they experience the duality of this world, and yes, it disgusts them. You know, it just gets to the point where they're unhappy with what they've experienced here, and they want to experience the real. But people are different. Some people have a pure motivation. They simply want to know truth. Yeah, so it varies. You know, I mean, what you're saying has a lot of validity. The way to understand it perfectly, however, is to see what you said in conjunction with the fact that people are all different and are motivated in different ways. Not everyone is the same. Yeah, so some people will need to hit rock bottom, so to speak. Just experience all the things of this world and then finally realize, oh, this place is horrible. There's nothing but suffering here. You know, let me try to seek something higher. For some people, they don't need that at all. Some people, they can just take a purely philosophical approach, you know, even from the very beginning, where they haven't experienced a lot of pain, but they understand theoretically that the world is a place of pain. And they want to understand God despite themselves not having necessarily felt a lot of pain. So it will vary from person to person. And of course, why does it vary from person to person? Because for the vast majority of people, if not everyone, it's not their first birth. And yeah, most people are not just kind of starting from nowhere. They're starting the path from where they left off in previous lifetimes. So it will vary from person to person. Some people in the very beginning can jump right into bhakti yoga. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some can't.
Yeah, you have basically emphasized bhakti yoga to us, but have passed over karma yoga and jnana yoga because you wanted us.
Have I really, though?
The fastest path.
But have I really, though? We don't talk about jnana. We don't talk about wisdom. We don't talk about philosophy. We don't talk about Vedanta. Of course we do. And we don't talk about karma and try to engage in karma yoga. Of course we do. a greater and better way to understand the relationship between karma, jnana, and bhakti yoga, rather than what Ram Sukdev Swami?
Suktas.
Ram Sukta Swami. Well, I know who he is. You know, he passed away. He was a very nice person, but no, his understanding is somewhat flawed. The way to truly understand these yogas is that they're all practiced at once. Actually, they're all practiced at once and from the very beginning. As far as why they're even separated in the Bhagavad Gita, that's for analytic reasons. So you can understand the different aspects in a deeper sort of way. But truthfully, if you look at everything that you've learned here, all of our teachings, but also our activities, we're engaging in karma, jnana, and bhakti yoga simultaneously, always. Always. And there's a name for that process. It's called yoga. Yoga is practicing all the above. For that matter, we practice asana. For that matter, we also do some pranayama. For that matter, and on and on. The goal of yoga, what yoga truly is, yoga as a unified system, as understood properly in its authentic way, nothing is left out. Now, different people at different stages in their life will emphasize one or the other. That's true, but it's only a little bit of an emphasis on one or another. So at times, for example, we'll get together and the emphasis is jnana yoga, where all we'll talk about is Vedanta, for example, and not really talk about bhakti that much. Now, this is what's interesting. Even when we're doing that, it's permeated with bhakti. So we want to understand the yoga system in its unity, but also in its diversity of all these different names. It's very simply this. Very simply. What is yoga? Forget about the names, karma, jnana, bhakti, ashtanga for that matter. What is yoga? Yoga is doing everything, all the above, neglecting no aspect of the human person in performing yoga in order to know the divine. But with everything that we're doing, it is all, at all times, permeated with bhakti. So we practice jnana yoga, but it's permeated with bhakti. We practice karma yoga, but it's permeated with bhakti. We practice ashtanga yoga, do we not? But it's permeated with bhakti when we do the upasana sequence, correct? I'm asking you. Oh. That's why I'm looking at you. When we're doing the upasana sequence, that's ashtanga yoga, but it's permeated with bhakti. This process has a name, yoga. Yeah. So you say our emphasis tends to be on bhakti. No, our emphasis is on yoga, but permeated always with bhakti.
This was one of the very tricky questions Arjuna asked Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about karma yoga and jnana yoga, tell me which one of those is superior. And Krishna answers, none of them is. All of them lead to the same thing, that is realization of the consciousness. Actually, you said
exactly. It's yoga. Yeah, and for the sake of understanding them, of course, you can break it down into karma, jnana, and bhakti, and ashtanga. Those are the four primary yogas that Krishna speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita.
And in fact, he says that nobody can live without doing any karma. Even he does.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
There is no such thing as complete renunciation. It's a very interesting philosophical question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Philosophically, you can go very deep into this. Karma. What does karma mean? Karma simply means action. At what point do you cease action? The truth is, never. Even upon liberation, there is action. Even upon being in Vaikuntha, in the spiritual realm, with no tinge whatsoever of materiality, there is activity. So at no point do you cease this. At what point do you cease jnana? In fact, not just at what point do you cease it, at what point do you begin jnana? You see, this is why, unfortunately, he's wrong. This very nice Swami who you mentioned. You can't do karma yoga unless you have jnana, because why then are you even doing the karma yoga? So jnana is there always. You first know, why should I do karma yoga? My goal, what is your goal in doing karma yoga? you have to first know, all right, I am in illusion, I want to achieve liberation. See, that's jnana. Thus I will do karma yoga. So from beginning to end, there is jnana, there is wisdom. And then bhakti is always there from beginning to end. Again, all yoga permeated with bhakti. So the truth of the matter is, this is the nature of the yoga system. It is indeed a diamond. Imagine you have like the Hope diamond or some massive diamond in your hand, really large diamond that weighs like 5 pounds, and you've got it in your hand. Now you look at that diamond and you can see that they're all what they call the different facets of the diamond, almost like different windows in which you can peer into the diamond. However, there is also the diamond itself. Without those facets, there wouldn't be the diamond, but then it's the diamond that has the facets. In the same way, there is yoga. Yoga is the diamond. But then there are the facets. You can look at the different aspects of that one yoga. That's karma, that's jnana, that's bhakti, that's ashtanga. Bhakti in the sadhana sense, not bhakti in the state of being sense. You know the difference, yeah. So those are the facets. But without the facets, there's no diamond. Without the diamond, there are no facets. There's yoga, but then there are the different aspects of yoga. There are the things that make up yoga. And there's no one without the other.
Yeah, from time to time in my more enlightened moments, I've appreciated that they're all involved simultaneously. We had a reading group on the Bhagavad Gita at Unity Church. The leader of it was not really that versed in the philosophy, but nevertheless, basically the first day I said to the group, these 3 yogas are really the same thing. You do them, well, I didn't say you do them all at the same time, but that was my idea. Mm-hmm. Because they're intermingled with each other.
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. Yeah, you were correct to tell them that. They are one yoga. It's one yoga system. Isn't it amazing how it comes back to this again and again when talking about the scriptures and trying to understand the scriptures? This is why we need a guru. Otherwise, we just speculate. We speculate. We saw that even today looking at the Narada Bhakti Sutras. What to speak of something as deep as, let's say, the Brahma Sutras, the Yoga Sutras, but then Bhagavad Gita also. If we just know nothing, we come from a place of no knowledge and we say, all right, I want to learn this Bhagavad Gita. Oh, let me go to Barnes & Noble, let me purchase a physical book for $9.95 called the Bhagavad Gita. Let me bring it home, and just like I'm reading a Stephen King novel, let me sit down and have my little lamp next to me and just read through it. And my goal is by the time I get to the last page, I'll understand what is being said here. No, you will not. Yeah, we have a nice camera here. Let me look into it. No, you will not. For those in the future who will be watching this. If you simply pick up a Bhagavad Gita and read it and think that at the end you will understand it, no, you will not, without the benefit of a guru. Because there are an unlimited number of, I don't want to say this as if the scriptures themselves are something nefarious. They're not. We create these. But there are an unlimited number of traps in which we can fall if we simply sit down and just kind of read the scriptures ourselves. We create the traps. It's our illusion. It's our ignorance, our avidya, our ignorance that create the traps. It's not that the traps are there naturally. No, the scriptures exist to do the opposite, to illumine us. But the scriptures themselves tell us how to illumine ourselves. That is, we surrender to a guru.
I think it's even the world's greatest sages have misinterpreted or interpreted in a different way. The Mahavakyas, like Brahma Samhita, controversies as to what does it mean. You need a guru would explain it to you. That what I think that's absolutely true. Otherwise, it's so confusing.
You can have 3 of the shortest words that come from the Upanishads. And speculation will go on for 2,000 years about what they mean. With no conclusion. If you simply try to speculate, if you do indeed speculate. versus learning from a source.
There are a lot of misleading books at Barnes and Noble. Religion section, written by, agnostics or, people who don't understand what they're writing about.
Yeah.
Or atheists writing about religion, writing textbooks about religion.
And the internet, forget about it. What to speak of all the books with their confusion? Yeah, if you try to get knowledge, oh yes, what is Vedanta's conclusion on the ultimate nature of God? Yeah, try looking that up on the internet. You'll get 10,000 contradictory ideas. And that's the problem with speculation. That's why the route for knowing anything of value is never speculation. Why? We're using a flawed tool to know that which is unflawed. We're using an imperfect means to know the perfect. See, even in English grammar alone, we can intuitively understand the problem of trying to use an imperfect means to understand the perfect. That's not possible. It's not possible. It's like trying to use a rock to understand philosophy rather than a brain. It won't work. It's the wrong tool. It's an imperfect tool for the project at hand. Water, and first you put some water on it. It's symbolically, you are purifying that thing before you even offer it. That's the idea. You don't offer something impure. If you're going to offer food, let's say, you don't offer food that someone else has taken a bite out of or that fell on the floor or something like that. Everything you offer is pure. In the same way, what ultimately is the ultimate goal of our path? It's prapatti, it's self-surrender, it's self-offering to God. That's a term I've never used out loud before. It's self-offering. Self-surrender, that kind of says it. But if we understand it in this way, it gives us an even deeper understanding. Our goal is self-offering, to offer ourselves in the same way that we offer incense, in the same way that we offer things to God with devotion. We ultimately want to offer ourselves to God with devotion. Shouldn't we, before we even attempt that, offer Him the best? Yeah. So maybe that was too much detail, but hopefully that answered your question.